Okay, so hopefully everybody can hear me. Essentially, all we're doing is going through Caleb Maupin's BreadTube Serves Imperialism book. So I will be just reading through this essentially, and once I'm done, then I'll upload it as a video on YouTube. I figured this is going to be an easier way to get through it rather than sitting down to record it as a more edited video, because that tends to, if I stuff up a line, I stop recording and I go back, and that gets very, very unsettling, and it takes a long time. So I figured that this way we could hang out a little bit and we could get through BreadTube Serves Imperialism, examining the new brand of internet pseudo-socialism. There we go, by Burger King himself. And there we go. Oh, goodness me. We'll get there. We will get there eventually. Etc., etc. He has his acknowledgements at the start, where he thanks Peter Coffin twice, which is pretty hilarious. All right. Introduction. The capitalists fight with one another. The capitalists fight with one another to corner the market and divide up the world. Their quest for maximum profit is the cause of war and puts us on the dole. Their greed leads them into a crisis which they try to resolve with a more fascist state. Our struggle is against the whole capitalist system. So strike at the fascists as well as the cuts. Cornelius Cadu, Lords of Labour. How wunderbar. All right. Oh my goodness. Where did my tiny... where did my chat go? I'm very good at this. Can you tell that I'm very, very good? Hello, SB AXA and Tristan. How are we? On this wonderful, Wednesday afternoon. I'm on holidays now, so the days are starting to blend into one another. To continue. The events of January 6, 2021 will go down in history. The images of supporters of President Donald Trump and adherents of the QAnon conspiracy theory bursting into the US Capitol building shook the world. While US media presented it as simply an example of the criminal and violent nature of Trump supporters, to any observer with an astute political understanding, it showed much more than that. The extent to which FBI informers and other infiltrators were involved in helping the events to happen as they did has not yet been fully revealed. Such an occurrence was only allowed to happen because deep divisions exist within the US power structure. Within the circles of wealth and power, the intelligence agencies and the military, there are serious divisions. The pandemic, the bumbling government response at local and federal levels, and the resulting economic fallout has only exacerbated those differences. US society is in a deep crisis. The crisis is rooted not in multiculturalism, a lack of patriotism, or a lack of virtue signaling and woke sentiments, but in the fundamental problems of capitalism. Capitalism, the system of production organized for profit, is reaching a breaking point. A prolonged crisis of overproduction spawned by the computer revolution has made the long-standing problem of workers' competition with machines and poverty resulting from abundance far more deadly. Workers are suffering, the economy is stagnating, unrest is rising, and the influence of the United States around the world is in decline. Divisions in the ruling class. The trend which Karl Marx described in his pamphlet The 18th Brumaire of Louis Napoleon, in which one section of the capitalist class seeks to suppress other sections in an attempt to stabilize society and liquidate the crisis, is very much alive. The Obama administration, in an alliance with ExxonMobil, the Rockefellers, and the Silicon Valley tech giants, attempted to carry out strategies put forward by the Council on Foreign Relations and introduced measures to better control the US economy and strategically roll back the influence of Russia and China. Trump, aligned with capitalists like Betsy DeVos, Sheldon Adelson, Mike Lindell, the fracking corporations and military contractors, took moves to push back against these moves. What? Poorly written. The goal was to maintain a more libertarian economic model and secure the profits of those who lost out from Obama's maneuvers. In the 1980s, the US ruling class seemed to be in a state of near unity, and the US economy was strong. Ronald Reagan remarked, "We are all friends after 6 o'clock," when speaking of the elected officials in Washington, D.C. The events on January 6th indicate pretty clearly the opposite state of affairs. The January 6th events reminded many of the events of August 11th and 12th, 2017 in Charlottesville. A crowd of white nationalists and conservatives assembled for a torch-lit march, and the following day held a public demonstration to oppose the removal of a monument to the Confederacy. At the demonstration on August 12th, left-wing activists mobilized to counter the racists. Scuffles took place and a white supremacist activist plowed his car into a crowd of leftists, killing Heather Heyer. A police helicopter also crashed, killing 2 state troopers. In other writings, such as my book Kamala Harris and the Future of America, I have provided extensive analysis of the divisions within the US ruling class. I focus on how these divisions have evolved over the course of the last decades and what the various factions want. This text will focus on another aspect of the conflict. The Marxist composer Cornelius Cardew penned these lyrics describing the process of capitalist decay. The capitalists fight with one another to corner the markets and divide up the world. Their quest for maximum profits is the cause of war and puts us on the dole. Their greed leads us into a crisis, which they try to resolve with a more fascist state. Our struggle is against the capitalist system, so strike at the fascists as well as the cuts. I don't know how anyone takes Caleb seriously. Yeah. Look, I don't think I've watched anybody reading through or reacting to this book, so it's all going to be new to me, which is great. And I can only hear this in his voice, which is excellent. It has long been understood that as the capitalist crisis emerges, the various factions in the ruling class form political movements to serve them. These political movements target one section of the capitalist class on behalf of the other, while also mobilizing against revolutionary forces that seek to overthrow the capitalist system. British intelligence officer Frank Kitson described the practice of forming counter-gangs in Kenya to fight against the Land and Freedom Army. These were pseudo-revolutionary groups that collected intelligence and helped the British Empire to defeat the Mau Mau uprising. Kitson later pioneered the British intelligence strategy of arming Protestant fanatics to target the Irish Republican Army during the 1980s. William S. Lind, the Pentagon strategist and military analyst, has developed the concept of fourth-generation warfare, in which non-state actors are utilized by great powers in their efforts to undermine rivals. My general view of him, I know the online left take the piss. So look, the 2 reasons that I think people take the piss, one is obviously the Thought Slime videos where, Thought Slime mispronounced Burger King as Burger King in an effort to be, funny, and Caleb took that as some weird notion that that Thought Slime was some, bougie, never worked a day in his life, and, whereas Caleb was, down with the working class. So that kind of strange, like he's a millennial, basically. Like, I think he's about my age, but he's a little bit disconnected internet stuff. Like, he's not terminally online, and so he misinterprets things. And the other thing, and I think it's kind of linked to that, is he seems too sincere all the time, and like everything, he's just always a little bit too serious. And so I think from that, people, take the piss of him as well. Look, and I've only been exposed to him through really other people's stuff and some of his things on Twitter, which, again, he's really self-righteous and self-assured and a little bit too serious, I would say. So yeah, that's my general impression of him. And already reading the first few pages of this, I feel as though he has kind of a reductionist view of the world, almost like a mechanistic view, like everything is planned out, everything is, strategized. Everything is, important players moving behind the scenes. Which I guess is why he's a tanky, All right. Endless pages have been written about how the right-wing faction of US Capitol is utilizing white nationalists, QAnon, libertarians, the Tea Party, and other rightists as a counter-gang of non-state actors to fight on their behalf. However, very little has been written about what is obviously retaliation from the rival faction. The internet culture of social justice warriors and the emergence of a group of pseudo-leftist internet voices called BreadTube is an attempt to counter the influence of right-wing voices among the US population with a covert backing of the rival faction of imperialists. Kind of self-explaining. It's Caleb Maupin, who works for RT. And so that's the other thing, is that, he clearly has a bias there. That kind of left, I guess, tanky section of the left that view anything that, RT do as ideologically neutral or ideologically beneficial or something. It's always, they're super critical of the US and the US media landscape, and they're not at all critical of the people that they, support, which irks me, I guess. He is such a tanky, the kind of person who calls criticism of communist countries CIA propaganda. Exactly. And that kind of goes to that whole, when I described him as really reductionist and like mechanistic or something, like he has this view as everybody that, opposes anything in Russia or in China as some CIA psyop instead of people just sitting back and being able to analyze things. BreadTube has covert backing. Covering. Yeah, I know. I'm waiting for my CIA dollars to come through as well. Countering the right wing is certainly a noble effort, as the racism, destructive economic ideas, and delusional conspiracy theories coming from the Trump faction are certainly problematic. However, the BreadTube current are loyal servants of the more liberal faction among the imperialists, and as such they have engaged in a second mission. In addition to countering the right-wing faction, the second task the BreadTube Milieu has engaged in is an effort to purge left-wing circles of all illiberal, anti-imperialist voices, and to some extent, all voices that are genuinely anti-capitalist. In order to transform leftism into nothing but lockstep servitude of their preferred faction among the ruling class, they seek to equate Marxist-Leninists and 21st century socialists with the far right. This is going to be wild, how he chooses to justify this. Sorry if that sounded rude. Just joined the stream, and after you talked about that, it just came to mind. No, that didn't sound rude at all. Don't worry. We know the CIA told you to review this book. Oh my God, Ryan, shut up! You're gonna blow my cover. There's literally some dude behind me with a gun right now. It's like got it cocked at my head. Make Caleb look stupid. All right, lessons from the 1930s. Okay, and this, so apparently I do have lots to say about Caleb Maupin. So I'm a modern history teacher, and I teach, Nazi Germany, where we look at kind of the experience for normal people in Nazi Germany. But he is so ensconced in historical socialism that I think he tries to carry that narrative through whatever is happening currently. And so he always seeks to turn whatever, he's dealing with or whatever he's analyzing, he kind of tries to contort it and fit it into this neat narrative where he can look at all the historical stuff that happened and say, see, it's just exactly like that. So, BreadTube's efforts are reminiscent of the efforts by the Social Democrats following the Russian Revolution. During the 1920s and up until the mid-1930s, the various parties that had once made up the Second International said, our main enemy is on the left. In the name of opposing communism, the Social Democrats, including the Socialist Party of America, sought to have communists banned from labor unions, suppressed by the government, and thrown in prison. In Weimar Germany, the Social Democratic Party formed its own militia to suppress the German Communist Party. In events like the infamous Bloody May of 1929 in Berlin's Wedding District, police officers and others associated with the Social Democratic Party killed 33 communists while suppressing an uprising. In response, communists across the world accused Social Democrats of being social fascists. British communist theoretician R. Palm Dutt composed an important book entitled Fascism and Social Revolution, arguing that Social Democrats ultimately served the same purpose as Italian fascisti, brutally suppressing communists and stabilizing capitalism. In 1935, the Soviet Union faced the threat of Nazi invasion, and global politics had significantly shifted as a result of Hitler's seizure of power. The communists of the world reoriented to building a people's front. They aligned with Social Democrats. In the lead-up to the Second World War, Social Democrats dropped much of their anti-communist fanaticism and embraced communists as anti-fascist allies. The various People's Front alliances, including the Roosevelt Coalition in the United States, won many great victories for working people and set the stage for the defeat of fascism. During the 1920s, German communists fought against Social Democrats who raised the slogan, "Our main enemy is on the left." The anti-communist violence of Social Democrats eventually set the stage for the Nazi takeover in 1933. Okay, so that is a reach. Wow. So, he is very clearly well-read and very clearly has a really good understanding of history. So I can't help but think that this is a deliberate misrepresentation. Like, if I'm going to steelman him, this is, at the very least, a deliberate misrepresentation of what happened to the incredibly varied... the incredibly complex, rather, turn of events over the 20 years from World War I to World War II in Germany, and what led to the Nazi takeover. So, all right. Many observers have noted the historical irony of communists and Social Democrats. Leftist infighting definitely contributed to fascism rising. Yes, but to say that eventually set the stage for the Nazi takeover ignores so many of the other kind of material conditions that were happening. The SDB imploded. Absolutely, they turned out to be ineffectual. But whether that was like directly linked to them, not liking communists. Many observers have noted the historical irony of communists and Social Democrats who literally killed each other in Germany, France, Britain, and elsewhere, joining arm in arm shortly afterward. However, circumstances had changed. The realignment resulted in a convergence of interests. The Social Democrats faced the threat of extermination from fascists who were aligned with industrial capitalists and militarists. Communists also faced extermination from fascists, and the Soviet Union realized a Nazi invasion was inevitable. This common interest in defeating fascism brought the two trends together during the Popular Front era and the Second World War. More dangerous than social democracy. While many lessons can be learned from this period, it must be noted that much of BreadTube's ideology is fundamentally more dangerous to those who seek to overturn capitalism than social democracy was during the 1920s and early 1930s. While the Social Democrats of the 1920s and 30s opposed the Soviet Union and the Communist parties, they accepted the overall Marxist analysis of capitalism. Social Democrats worked in labor unions and sought to increase the living standards of working people. Social Democrats believed history was moving forward and that technological progress was a good thing. Social Democrats sought, through gradual reform, to eventually establish a society where the means of production operated according to a rational central plan. The prevailing voices on BreadTube do not share these goals with Marxists. The prevailing BreadTube view is that the living standards of working people in the United States and throughout the world are too high and that consumption must be reduced. What? BreadTube voices generally argue that advocating for living standards to increase or analysing society in terms of wage workers and capitalists is an ideological crime known as class reductionism. BreadTube voices generally believe technological progress is an affront to Mother Nature and that societies around the world that are kept in a state of deindustrialization and underdevelopment are more pure and beautiful, close to some kind of spiritual ideal. BreadTubers generally reject the need for a centrally planned economy, but instead favor gradually transitioning to a profit-centered economy where workers receive a share of the profits rather than a set hourly wage. What the hell is he talking about? Deindustrialization more pure and beautiful? Like, I hope the reason that he's put those in in commas is because he's going to give sources for that. This is ridiculous. Like, the only thing that I think here that he's kind of grabbed onto is Richard Wolff and the notion of co-ops is relatively popular, I would say, on the left on YouTube. And as kind of like a next step after, militant unionization. Never heard of BreadTuber being an anarcho-primitivist. I know, right? Like, who was that? Was it the Khmer Rouge? Was it those dudes that were like super? They weren't like anarcho-primitivists. They were like Marxist-Leninists, but like got rid of basically everything that he's saying here. What is he talking about? This is truly bizarre and hilarious, and I love this book already so far. All right. While social democracy in the 1920s and even today generally represents a watered-down pro-imperialist interpretation of Marxism, what BreadTubers believe in is fundamentally antithetical to Marxism. Marxism seeks to advance historical progress and create a society of vast abundance in which all inequality and the need for a state itself can fade away. Contrarily, BreadTube seeks to roll back the wheels of history, reduce the human population, end growth, and restore humans to some kind of primitive state of existence deemed to be moral and sustainable. Like, I'm this is going to be wonderful when we actually get to his evidence. But all BreadTubers, like, not only do they make their living, or like the popular ones, with the internet, with computers, with technology, I would go so far as to say it's also their interest and their hobby and their vocation, like utilizing all of these kinds of technology. Like, I don't know any kind of anti-technology. Like, this is just weird as hell. Okay, so while social democracy in the 1920s tended to oppose illegal activities and militant labor activism, BreadTube has taken the opposite extreme. BreadTubers tend to favor an escalation of street violence against the right wing at a time when these forces are much better armed and have a much better organized base among the population. Is this just them because they're in favor of like BLM and stuff? If the eventual escalation that BreadTubers seem committed to inciting were to occur, the result would most likely be a huge crackdown on all political activism by the state, if not an outright victory for the right wing. So much wild speculation here as well. All BreadTubers hate technology. That's why being online is their job. Absolutely. And terminally online. Like, online too much, I would say, particularly going on Twitter. Like, they need to get out into pure nature. Furthermore, BreadTube often seems to almost incite lawless violence and hooliganism against Marxist-Leninists, 21st century socialists, and anti-imperialists at the same time that they call for mob violence against the right wing. BreadTube is actively working to change the political discourse, labeling anti-war and anti-imperialist voices as Red Browns and Nazbols. That's because he's with the Nazbol guy. Equating them with Nazis and setting the stage of mob violence and state repression against them. What is he talking about? I mean, man, I was going to skip over this introduction and just go straight to like chapter 1 because introductions are usually not worth it. I am so glad I did not do this. This is the most compelling introduction I've ever read for a book. It may have been incorrect to label the Social Democrats of the 1920s social fascists, despite the fact that they advocated and engaged in violent repression against revolutionary forces. However, a much more explicitly fascist streak can be found in the BreadTube milieu. BreadTube's opposition to historical progress and growth evokes fascist Julius Evolar's references to the demonic nature of the economy and carries with it the genocidal legacy of eugenics and Malthusianism. BreadTube's fetishization of street violence and action over ideology, pushing left-minded youth toward a premature violent confrontation, also parallels Mussolini's political trajectory as described in his autobiography. BreadTube's implied calls for violence and political repression of anti-imperialist voices certainly brings forth memories of the Nazi stormtroopers. Oh my god. Yeah, this was written by an obvious fascist. No one else could get so many things wrong, even if they tried to. This is hilarious. This is the most wild take in the world. So, because I put up that thing recently where I was like, look, I'm going to pivot and focus on Australian content. And somebody recommended that I respond to this book. And I thought, okay, it's obviously, you know, American focused, but I like part of my, you know, pivot was away from what, you know, some of the criticisms that I have of the online left. And so I was like, oh, maybe Caleb has also, in his analysis, identified some of the same things as me. But wow, not at all. This is so much better. I mean, this is why he's a published author, isn't it? This is why he's getting flown to all these different countries. I gotta up my game. Okay. Whether or not BreadTube ideology constitutes a modern variant of fascism is not the focus of this book. Oh, dude, I'm almost positive it is. BreadTube, after all, is merely an internet community engaging in propaganda work. The ties of BreadTube to the Antifa street fighters are most likely extensive, but cannot be confirmed. Does this dude get all of his... Like, is there a Marxist equivalent for Fox News? Like, what is this guy talking about? So far, the actual violence against rival leftist voices has been rare, though cyberbullying, intense harassment, and intimidation has not. The purpose of this book is to debunk and expose the dangerous pseudo-leftism which BreadTube espouses. Genuine leftism and Marxism is the only way out of the crisis. The primitivist worker co-op, oh, there you go, non-authoritarian society BreadTubers advocate is not really achievable or desirable. There's like only a few popular anarchists. Like with the non-authoritarian, he must be referring to anarchists, right? I have criticism of the left in general. Pride stops too many of us from voting, leaving the rest of us to do the dirty work. Yeah, I mean, and see, that's the thing, is there are so many legitimate criticisms that you can have of either like praxis, like ideology and purity versus like pragmatism and how you go with that, or like optics and all this kind of stuff, to know like different preoccupations that people have, you know, focusing on maybe what we think are the wrong things, but none of that is whatever he's talking about here. Like, it is just so... I got to treat it as hilarious. Otherwise, I'm going to get, like, just too blown away. Yeah, absolutely. So, the distorted and confused worldview of BreadTubers ultimately serves the ultra-rich and globalist-oriented factions of the capitalist class. While it has very little to do with Marxism, it is highly reminiscent of the occultist worldview of Marilyn Ferguson, a spiritual guru who is highly influential among American intelligence operatives. It's all CIA. She served as spiritual advisor to Al Gore. This book will show that the BreadTube perspective is a mishmash of old, deviant, pessimistic trends among the middle class utilized to combat the socialist movement. What? Okay, well, there we go. That was the introduction. Now that we have wet our tongues, let's head in there. Chapter 1. What and who is BreadTube? The nature of the counter gang. As of this writing, the current Wikipedia article on BreadTube opens by defining it this way. BreadTube or LeftTube is a term used to refer to a loose and informal group of online content creators that provide editorial opinions and educational lectures from socialist, communist, anarchist, and other left-wing perspectives. BreadTube creators generally post videos on YouTube that are discussed on other platforms such as Reddit. BreadTube creators are known to participate in a form of algorithm hijacking. They will choose to focus on the topics discussed by content creators with far-right politics. This enables their videos to be recommended to the same audiences consuming far-right videos and thereby expose a wider audience to their perspective. I mean, I guess I would say that. Like, I've never heard of algorithmic hijacking, but yeah, like, talking about Ben Shapiro and talking about Steven Crowder is gonna get you more clicks. It's unfortunately a sad reality of being on the internet. But you know, with all the millions of dollars of advertising that those guys, and PragerU, etc., are putting in, I think there's also some kind of responsibility to provide pushback or a different perspective on these things in the off chance that somebody that watches that stuff is going to stumble on your video. This Wikipedia definition of BreadTube seems to almost confirm the thesis of this book. That BreadTube is an entity that is being utilized by the more powerful liberal globalist wing of the Western capitalist power structure to beat back the emerging right-wing opposition. What? It is worth examining a few of the major players in the BreadTube universe. So wait, does Caleb not view the right wing as his opposition either? It seems like from what he has been saying, it doesn't seem like he's particularly concerned about the right wing. He said, that racist and blah, blah, blah. But he kind of... Yeah, this is weird. Or does he view right wing as like neoliberal and globalist? And he's on the other side of that. And so if you're not on his side, that must mean that you're just in cahoots with the neoliberal globalists. Natalie ContraPoints Wynn. Probably the most level-headed and articulate voice among the BreadTube community is Natalie Wynn, who uses the moniker ContraPoints. Natalie is a transgender college graduate from Arlington, Virginia. She studied at Berklee College of Music, Georgetown University, and Northwestern University. ContraPoints has college graduate. Doesn't she have a master's in philosophy? Wasn't she like going to do her PhD and then kind of said, screw this? ContraPoints has received advertising from mainstream US capitalist media, with outlets like the New York Times and the New Yorker giving their stamp of approval for her supposedly anti-capitalist rhetoric. The Southern Poverty Law Center, which equates black nationalists with Nazis and has pushed the narrative that anti-war leftists are red-brown crypto-fascists, has approvingly cited Natalie Wynn in their reports and praised her efforts. This seems like... So, ContraPoints has received advertising. Do you mean they've written articles on her? I don't know if I would say that is advertising. Like, in a very kind of... yeah, you can say that, but then everything like that is advertising, right? Like, has received advertising from. That's just a very... Again, disingenuous way, I feel, to put that. Yeah, right. Yeah, no, exactly. She got her master's. Just to say she's a college graduate, then I feel, Yeah, exactly. And so already, what are we? We're like 10 pages in, and I'm identifying these trends where the language that he is using, like up here where it says, the Southern Poverty Law has pushed the narrative that anti-war leftists are red-brown crypto-fascists. He doesn't state who they are. Like, what group is he talking about here? Because, and I feel like he knows that if he puts the group there, people will go and Google it and find out that that analysis is probably correct. And so he's intentionally just kind of said it as anti-war leftists. Like, dude, understatement maybe an understatement. Yeah. All right. ContraPoints has produced a number of high-budget videos intended to refute right-wing ideas and urging the left to be more coherent in presenting an alternative message. Only just jumped on, but ContraPoints anti-capitalist, really. Oh, we will see. Urging left to be more coherent in presenting an alternative message. While her content is certainly of a much higher quality than other BreadTubers and contains a level of intellectual depth and engagement most BreadTubers are incapable of, ContraPoints is not particularly loved. ContraPoints has been targeted viciously by her own BreadTube community, accused of empathizing with bigots. Trying to understand right-wing views and why people adopt them is deemed an unforgivable crime by those who argue that only violence and cancel culture should be the response. This is I would not be surprised if Caleb works for Fox News. This is the most hilarious view of the left I have seen. So Caleb is he's a Marxist. He's an activist. Like, he, for over a decade, has been super active in the American political sphere, like Occupy Wall Street or anti-war rallies. Like, he really has been, like, you know, out and doing his thing. And yeah, but he's kind of fallen ass backwards now into BreadTube, and it didn't work out so well, and now he's written this whole book about it. And instead of, like I was saying before, you know, just talking about how, you know, that there are some criticisms that you can have about LeftTube that I have about it. He's saying that they're, like, almost worse than Nazis. It's so great. All right. This is a common viewpoint among BreadTube voices. ContraPoints, herself transgender, has been critical of the ideology advocated by much of the trans movement, deconstructing some of the prevailing interpretations of what transgenderism means. This has also made her the target of lengthy harassment campaigns. And so that's that video with Jyoti Brar, the head of the British Communist Party, and where she was talking about transgender ideology. And again, it's his specific and particular use of language that is now, yeah, okay. And up here, like, accused of empathizing with bigots. Now, I thought he was going to have a few different, bit of a troll. Yeah. Oh, true. Okay, there you go. I thought he was going to have some more stuff there. But no, he just had one thing. I really like ContraPoints in her work, but she's a reformist liberal at best politically. Probably. Like, I think, you know, and there's a spectrum on YouTube. There's a spectrum of, like, reformist liberals to, you know, anarchists, anarcho-communists, Marxist-Leninists, and so the whole BreadTube thing, you know, because someone like ContraPoints, yeah, is a reformist liberal. You know, probably a sock dem or a dem sock. Whereas then you have, like, Marxist-Leninists also on YouTube, or, yeah, narco-communists. And they sort of occupy the same space and they kind of do the same thing, but lumping them all in together like Caleb's trying to do here just doesn't work. And it ends up apparently where you have to just call them all Nazis. ContraPoints generally puts forward the view that the US government has been infiltrated by a secret Nazi conspiracy and that the role of leftists is to protect the establishment by rooting out this conspiracy. Wynne urged leftists to vote for Joe Biden in a video where she compared advocating socialist revolution to suicidal ideation. That is a lot. Those two sentences have done a lot. ContraPoints generally puts forward the view that the US government has been infiltrated by a secret Nazi conspiracy and that the role of leftists is to protect the establishment by rooting out this conspiracy. I love that there are no footnotes to this. No, or maybe at the end of each chapter, he is going to have a list of sources. Like, link to those videos. That's the easiest thing. Link to the videos. Yeah, exactly. Source. Like, what? Just, but if it's on YouTube, like, if these things are in videos, link to the videos. All right. Okay. Harris Bomber Guy Brewis. So I got to say, H Bomber Guy was one of the people, one of the first people that got me like into the left, and it was because of his like gaming and it was the Davis Orini shit that he was doing. That is what like got me into his content and then got me into more like left-wing content online. Okay, but let's see what Caleb thinks about him. Harris Michael Brewis, who uses the internet moniker H-Bomber Guy, much like ContraPoints, devotes much of his content to debunking the views of right-wingers, not to promoting Marxism. Okay. Brewis is based in Britain and is a member of the Labour Party and a supporter of Jeremy Corbyn. His videos largely focus on debunking the claims of pickup artists, flat earth conspiracists, and those who allege that soybeans reduce testosterone. I love that. He also comments on video games, movies, and other cultural topics. One of Brewis's greatest achievements was a fundraising stream for the British transgender advocacy and charity organisation known as Mermaids. On this stream, which continued for 57 hours and 48 minutes, Brewis was joined by US Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Chelsea Manning, as well as a number of Hollywood actors such as Colin Mockery and Mara Wilson. Oh wow, I didn't know that Mara Wilson was on there. Does everybody know that Mara Wilson is Ben Shapiro's cousin? Isn't that just hilarious? I feel like he should have said, because didn't they raise over $300,000 for that? I feel like that is something that he also should have popped into there. All right. Ian Vaush Koczynski, a video game playing child of wealth. From Beverly Hills, named Ian Koczynski, has taken on the moniker Vaush. He has been appointed by YouTube algorithms as the unofficial spokesperson for Marxist, socialist, and leftist thought. Vaush's father is Mark Koczynski, a figure in Hollywood who describes himself on LinkedIn as director, visual effects artist, and supervisor with 20 years of experience in production. I feel like if he was really famous, Caleb would have put in some of the movies he's worked on, and so I don't feel like he's... Anyway, I might be wrong. Maybe Vaush's dad is great. So wasn't Jim Sterling on that stream, or am I thinking of a different stream? I'm not sure. So I never watched the stream. That was the Donkey Kong 64 one, though, right? Where he just went through Donkey Kong 64, like, for, 57 hours or something crazy. He thinks H-Bomber Guy is bad because he makes videos that he finds interesting instead of videos just praising Marxism. Yeah, and that's the other thing. Like, earlier when I was saying how, for YouTubers, I would say that, video as a medium and the technology surrounding it and all of that kind of stuff is also their hobby, is their interest. Caleb's interests are ideology. Like, he said something earlier, like that, convincing them to be entertaining instead of pursuing ideology or something like that. Like, Caleb loves books and ideology and blah, 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 blah. So, yeah, he's like kind of, he's basing all of these assumptions on, or his appraisal rather, on what he views as valuable or as important, but he never really explicitly states that or explicitly states why that is important or valuable. All right. In earlier years, Vaush used the moniker Irish Laddie. He appeared on the streams of internet video game enthusiast Stephen Destiny Burnell to argue in favour of his interpretation of anarcho-communism. He eventually set up his own Twitch and YouTube channel on which to play video games and urge listeners to vote for Joe Biden. On his streams, Ian often claims there is a secret Nazi conspiracy that has infiltrated the US government. What does anybody know what he's talking about when he's saying a secret Nazi conspiracy that has infiltrated the US government? Because he said that now about Vaush and about, or Vaush? Vaush? I don't have much to do with Vaush. And ContraPoints. Like, what is this secret Nazi conspiracy that he's thinking of? All right. Misinterprets key Marxist concepts, equates critics of US foreign policy, for example, tankies, with Nazis, all while using excessive profanity. In the aftermath of the January 6th Capitol riot, Vaush appeared to call for mass totalitarian-style disappearing of Trump supporters, tweeting out, "Democracies cannot coexist with these people. They disappear or we all do." All right. Okay. Kaczynski seems to have an odd fascination with pedophilia. In one debate, he argued that purchasing a laptop computer was morally equivalent to purchasing child pornography. Oh, that was when he was debating vegan gains. So I'm vegan, and occasionally, so I don't know. I have a kind of little soft spot for vegan gains, although I would never, stand behind him, and back him up, basically. But, he's interesting. The kind of thing that happens to these debate bros is that they have to like save themselves from, quote unquote, losing a debate. They have to go to these weird extremes where, saying that purchasing a laptop computer was morally equivalent to purchasing child pornography. Because I saw that bit and it was fucked. Like, it's just dumb. And that's a reason why I really dislike the whole debate, sphere thing. Because it's not about the position or the ideas. It is just about their ability to use rhetoric and semantics and create these little scenarios where, you have to kind of choose a really terrible topic to stay consistent. And I hate that. Okay. In other instances, he's argued for ending age of consent laws, though he has since claimed to have changed his position. The website Drama Report... Wait, isn't this the first... In all of these YouTubers he's covered so far, this is the first source that he's given, and it's a website called Drama Report. All right. The website Drama Report published an article on September 8, 2020, featuring claims from a former friend of Vaush who said he had admitted to her that he viewed child pornography and that she had reported him to the FBI. Ian Kaczynski has admitted that he did indeed sexually harass at least one woman while he operated under the moniker Irish Laddie, sending them inappropriate messages, including statements about and photos of his genitals and threatening to dox the woman if she went public about his behavior. Vaush has acknowledged and apologized for such actions. A large number of unconfirmed rumors about other sexual misconduct allegedly perpetrated by Vaush can be found online. The personality of the 25-year-old indicates signs of narcissism and sex addiction. Caleb Maupin be like, from the respected academic journal Kiwi Farms comes this revelation. Look, that would be the second source that he's reference that he's given so far. So, look, if it's if he's going to give Kiwi Farms, at least he's citing his sources. Never mind, I was thinking of Philosophy Tube. Oh, okay, yep. All right. Some have speculated. Oh, this is like the laziest. This is like a news article. You know, people have stated, or reports have been. You know, concerns have been raised. It's like the weediest. How can you write it? Oh, okay. I'm getting away with it. So, some have speculated that his blatant rudeness and inability to comprehend other people's views indicates he may be in the autistic spectrum. Well, that is not where I thought that was going. Vosh seems to have a bigoted view of Midwestern and Southern Americans, viewing them as inferior rabble, not as sophisticated as he and his wealthy neighbors in Beverly Hills. In his perspective, the calls for economic justice from working people in the Rust Belt are class reductionism and fascist populism. I would love any source for any of this. This is the laziest writing in the world. Okay, Koczynski has lied excessively about this author, claiming which might be why, so far, Vosh has had about 5 times the length that the other people have had. Okay, claiming that he is a literal Nazi and that he supports US billionaire capitalists like Jeff Bezos, statements he clearly knows to be false. He also baited this author for allegedly being anti-American, which is a very odd accusation for a supposed Marxist and anarcho-communist to make. Why? In many streams, it seems apparent that Vosh has handlers or advisors who are more familiar with Marxism than he is? What? In many streams, it seems apparent that Vosh has handlers or advisors who are more familiar with Marx. Oh, is this because he thinks everyone's paid by the CIA? Often Vosh will be seen stuttering his way through explaining concepts that he does not clearly understand, clearly quoting someone else, most likely an individual who learned the concept in an academic, not activist setting. Oh my God, we're still going, CIA confirmed, 100%. His handlers. In one embarrassing stream, Vosh read aloud quotes from Mao Zedong, Lenin, and Marx, which he said justified support for the Democratic Party of the United States in the 2020 election. It became clear to many viewers that the list of quotes had been prepared by someone else and that Vosh knows very little about Russian or Chinese history. However, this has not stopped this smug video game player from occupying the position of being the primary Marxist voice on the internet. What are you... Oh my God. That's Richard Wolff. Richard Wolff is literally the, biggest Marxist. Marxian, as he says. What is he? But again, he doesn't even... He didn't say that the quotes didn't support his claim. He just said that, but I don't actually think he wrote those quotes. He didn't even... Oh, man. Okay. All right, we're going to keep going. Vosh, how long is this Vosh bit going to go for? He really hates him. Okay. Can't believe my autistic ass gets lumped in with Vosh. No, that just means that you can now go and get money from the CIA, I'm pretty sure. All right. Vosh routinely quotes from Radio Free Asia and other US State Department propaganda outlets, treating them as reliable sources of information, while deeming all media from anti-imperialist countries or putting forward an anti-imperialist perspective to be non-credible. Do you have evidence of this? Just so many wild assertions, and they are wild assertions. If you had said BreadTubers seem to focus on a lot of social issues rather than materialist or economic issues, I would go, yeah, okay, that's not a wild assertion. But if you're talking about how they've like got CIA handlers and shit, I feel as though you need to be providing evidence. But this is a book. This is a published book. Okay. One of Vosh's favorite talking points is to accuse all who question US media allegations against China, Iran, Russia, and other anti-imperialist states of being the equivalent of Nazi Holocaust deniers. Okay, I'm going to guess here that it's the Uyghur thing in Xinjiang province that tankies hate talking about. Right? Tankies hate talking about that. And like, I think it was there's some... Caleb was recording himself on the street somewhere, and he was addressing it and basically saying, oh, it's all US propaganda, blah, 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 blah. Like, that whole thing of, if you're against my position, you're the enemy. Anything from my position is perfect and true. According to Vosh, if US media says that Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction, or that the evil Spaniards have sunk the USS Maine, you must believe it. What? Okay, I'm sorry, but Caleb would be a great debate, bro. Why doesn't he get into that sphere? Why is he not... Oh, man. Because I feel like he has this in his head. I'm guessing that it didn't take him long to write this book at all. I mean, not just because there's not a lot of citations, but I think he's I think he's a quite intelligent person. And he knows, like I said, his history and his ideology. He's not talking about something equivalent to hating talking about that something. Yeah, exactly, right? All right. We'll see. Maybe you're in there. I mean, are you, Radical Review, are you getting your CIA kickback money? I hope you are. If you're not, you need to hit up Vosh's handlers. Yeah. Okay. Evil Spaniards. Oh, man, this is the best book I've ever read. Okay. If you do not, you are the same as a neo-Nazi and deserve to be beaten up by Antifa, if not disappeared in order to protect the great American democracy. You deserve to be beaten up by Antifa. Oh, Caleb, my sweet, sweet boy. All right, Socialism Done Left. An individual using the name Socialism Done Left on Twitter and YouTube grabbed some widespread attention when it was revealed that they may not actually be a leftist at all. What? Is this a year 8, magazine article that... Oh, okay. According to an article published by Vice News... Oh, okay, here we go. We've got our second citation of the thing, and it's Vice. So we've had Drama Alert, and now we've had Vice. Excellent. Anti-imperialist Vice, I guess. Okay. Socialism Done Left is a socialist YouTuber in the broad, loosely categorized group of YouTubers that's been dubbed BreadTube by fans. While Socialism Done Left normally pushes for progressive policies, the leaked Discord messages, which include dozens of overtly racist comments about black people, anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, and Islamophobia, show that the public personas of some BreadTubers are at odds with what they say behind the scenes. It has also raised questions about whose side some of these streamers and YouTube personalities are really on. The messages, some of which Socialism Done Left has admitted to posting, apparently come from the YouTuber Destiny's Discord channel and were largely made in 2019. Okay. Beaten by Antifa. I mean, that sounds like an excellent hardcore band name. Like, Beaten by Antifa. I love it. Okay, while Socialism Done Left is a much less well-known BreadTube personality, the revelations about them grabbed attention due to widespread suspicions about various BreadTube voices, their origins, and their sincerity. The Vice write-up goes on. What is he's still quoting Vice. What? Okay. Socialism Done Left has since apologised for these messages on a Twitch livestream, saying that some of these statements were jokes made for shock humour and that he does not use this language anymore, 3 years later in 2021. He also said that in some cases he was mimicking the language of racists and emphasised that he doesn't find this language acceptable. Despite Socialism Done Left's apology, leftists on Twitter and elsewhere don't seem to be buying it. This is it's like the first thing that I will agree with. I 100% think that leftists on Twitter would go off. Okay. Or at least they don't feel obligated to trust or listen to this person any longer. Okay. Naming my next band Beaten by Antifa. Excellent. CIA doing extrajudicial rendering to black sites. Now, the real problem with the CIA is creating lefty Twitter accounts who are occasionally mean to me. Complains about CIA site spies. Oh, Caleb. Wow. Okay, the claim that such statements were intended as jokes doesn't seem to hold up when examining their context. The Vice report quotes one of the whistleblowers who said, "Why the fuck are black people, Jewish people, and trans people always at the butt of these shitty jokes? Who were you parodying here? Punchline?" What? Report quotes one of the whistleblowers. Oh, I thought that... Sorry, I just totally misread that, and I thought it was going to be one of the things that he had said. Okay. It's worth noting that Socialism Done Left echoed the anti-tanky narrative... equating leftists who do not echo US foreign policy rhetoric with the far right. If you don't agree with me, you echo US foreign policy rhetoric. It seems that inciting leftists against China was the primary focus of Socialism Done Left content, much of which has been removed in the aftermath of the leaked messages. Oh, here we go. Matt Thoughtslime. Wait, what? All the other people that got their name also had their last name there. A Canadian comedian who whose legal first name is Matt. Thoughtslime needs to change across all platforms. That should be the first thing on any of their sites. A Canadian comedian whose legal first name is Matt. Doctor in internet drama. Well, then he'll be able to write for Drama Alert. Okay, is one of the primary voices on the internet purporting to be an expert on Marxism and anarchism. I don't think Thoughtslime does purport that. Matt identifies as non-binary, meaning they do not identify with either the male or female gender, and prefers to be referred to as they rather than he or she. Matt uses the YouTube moniker Thoughtslime, and their video background features a green snot-looking sludge. Matt is essentially a cyberbully who wraps their comedy in pseudo-leftist ideology and 90s goth-style edgelordism? What? I want to know their first illegal name. Well, it's Mildred. 90s goth-style edgelord? Oh, maybe Caleb is older than me. Does anybody know how old Caleb is? I actually have to check. I'm sorry. All right. Okay, Caleb. No. Jimmy Dore. People also search for Jimmy Dore. Of course they do. Okay, I don't know. Age. Caleb Maupin age. Not publicly available. Okay, well, that was kind of useless. Y'all thought Leafy is here and Keemstar and such were mean. Wait until you hear about this Thoughtslime character. The biggest bully on YouTube. Oh, especially with the 90s goth-style edgelordism. I'm certain I'm older. Matt seems to have had a very difficult life, Something they frequently remind viewers. Oh, that's the grossest way to put that. Something they frequently remind viewers of. Not something they frequently reflect on. Not something they frequently talk about. Something they frequently remind viewers of. Topics like suicide, depression, child abuse, bullying, and mental health are frequently discussed. After a failed comedy career, Matt turned to making movie reviews for YouTube and somehow seems to have stumbled into politics. All the early ThoughtSlime, like ThoughtSlime 1.0, with the like little cartoons, were all politics. Like all the intro to anarchy and like they are some of the I love all of that earlier ThoughtSlime stuff. It was only like maybe 2 years ago that Scaredy Cats got up off the ground. Wow. Stumbled into politics. According to YouTube Wiki Fandom, Matt's mother is Colleen Estevez, a convicted white-collar criminal. Oh, what is this? It's like going through all of Vosh's stuff. Like, I thought the whole thing was about the kind of ideology that they're pushing. Not trying to dig up dirt on them. According to a CBC report dated September 26, 2013, Estevez worked with hell yeah, old school ThoughtSlime and Comrade Maxwell and such. Yeah, that was super good. I still go back and watch a bunch of those every now and again, and I'm consistently, maybe not surprised, but in awe at the conciseness that he's able to use, as well as the great analogies and the like narrative that is weaved through them that makes them so easy to take on. Maybe TS had some now deleted videos at movie reviews. Possibly. How would Caleb know? Oh, I've just realized that we've got another source. YouTube Wiki Fandom. Oh, and a CBS report. So wait, has he done more research about Matt's mum than everyone else? I'm not reading this cringe white supremacist book. No, that's why I am. And we're all laughing at. I also found it online. I did not buy it. Okay. Estevez worked with Human Resources and Skills Development Canada, as well as Service Canada, and deposited unauthorized funds into a joint account she held with her partner. The court was told during an earlier appearance that approximately $75,000 was deposited between January 27, 2007, August 2010. The court also heard that Estevez's partner had a gambling problem and that he would inform authorities if she stopped taking money. He eventually did when their relationship ended. The report states that Colleen Estevez pleaded guilty to fraud and breach of trust by a public official. Well, I don't think you can say that while Radical Review is here. A favorite dog on the left. No record exists of Matt ever being involved with any anarchist or communist organization or any activism aside from their online comedy screeds. Yeah, Tristan, I am. So I want to try and stream more. So I figured, rather than trying to, go through and record a video where I'm reading through this, because every time I stuff up, I stop the recording and go back and do it over, which takes forever. I might as well read it like this and then, be able to do a video on it at the end. And wow, it is exceeding my expectations absolutely tremendously. It's just the wildest shit that I have ever read. Honestly, this is just so off the chain. Okay. Or any activism aside from their online comedy screeds. So good. Matt's followers tend to target whoever Matt has chosen to unleash their rage on with absurd personal attacks and harassment. Matt routinely takes the statements that people make out of context. Is this the Burger King? Distorts opponents' positions and makes statements that they most likely realize to be false. Like what? Oh, here we go. For example, Matt has claimed that this writer's father was a Wall Street banker and that this writer has never criticized the right-wing YouTube channel PragerU, among other statements that are obviously inaccurate and could be debunked by a simple Google search. Caleb, talk about the pot calling the kettle black. Could be debunked by a simple Google search. Maybe you should try it sometime. Oh. Wall Street banker. Dad? What? I've watched, I think, all of Thought Slime's. So I rarely watch their live streams, but I've watched every Thought Slime video that is up on the channel, and I cannot remember that ever happening. I remember Matt talking about the whole Burger King thing, because Caleb said, when I was in college for a summer, I had to work at a sandwich shop, and he talked about, kind of slum tourism, like a middle class Caleb, going and working for a summer while at university instead of having to work those service jobs like Matt did for, over a decade out of necessity. You sound like you have a cold. I have really bad hay fever at the moment. And so I'm in, obviously, Australia, in Queensland, and it's summer, and everybody's mowing their lawns, and I've just got the worst hay fever, and I'm going through so many different kinds of tablets currently. And, oh yeah, okay. Sorry, I'm coughing heaps. I've only just realized. I'll try and tone it down. I read this book. It's a disaster. Yeah, it's wonderful. Matt's videos tends to fixate on things like slime, feces, genitalia, and other things deemed to be ugly. What? Deemed to be ugly? Oh, thanks, man. Deemed to be... Matt's channel is much like the Netflix show 13 Reasons Why, in that while it appears sympathetic to the mentally ill, what? It more or less encourages and enables people to fixate on their depressed, rageful, and suicidal feelings, wallowing in self-pity, anger, and hopelessness. What? What are you talking about? Again, this would be really easy if you just link to the videos. Go and watch this video. Go and watch this video. This begs a fair question. How many of Matt's mostly teenage and largely transgender audience have actually committed suicide after stewing with Matt for hours on their dark feelings? Holy shit. What the fuck? I was going to try and not swear in this. What? Oh, this is gross. Wow. The answer is, of course, unknown. The answer to this wild fucking question that I just made up out of nowhere that's super disgusting. Oh, it's just unknown. Of course, unknown. Matt is kind enough to often provide a trigger warning in front of their more depressed or grotesque screeds. Yeah, he's literally trying to blame Thought Slime for suicide. Yeah, wait, what? Okay, Radical Reviewer said it. There are so many Thought Slime videos about feces and genitalia. What? I can't think of any videos where Thought Slime has talked about feces or genitalia? What? This is wild. Okay. Maddie's often... Okay. Stephen Destiny Bennell. Okay. Yeah, I was about to say, why is he... Okay, in addition to these prominent voices, he's... Yeah, well, Caleb is a Marxist. He says he's a communist. He's, like, trying to currently with infrared. He's joined up with Has, like that total... If he wants to get on here and talk about all this, like, gross online stuff and cyberbullying, Has is, like, the most broiest dickhead that does all of that shit. Anyway, okay. In addition to these prominent voices among the BreadTube universe, there are a couple of other individuals who are worth mentioning. While they are not all technically BreadTubers by definition, they are part of the sphere from which this crop of bizarre pseudo-leftist influencers have originated. In 2011, a compulsive video game player from Nebraska quit his job as a carpet cleaner because he had figured out a method of making money entirely from playing the video game StarCraft 2. He also writes this. I mean, who is the audience for this? It's the way, because the way he's laying it out and how he talked about Matt being non-binary and then going on to do a really rudimentary explanation. It's clearly not for an audience. It's not for like LeftTube audiences or people who understand LeftTube or BreadTube rather. I don't know. And this, like a compulsive video game player, he's gonna make money from playing video games. Like such boomer vibes. All right. Stephen Destiny Bennell had been live streaming his playing of the game online and made enough money from the advertising revenue that he was able to make a very sizable income and stop working elsewhere. This achievement made him quite famous among the internet video game community. For many gamers, being able to quit their jobs, give up going outdoors or making real social connections and live entirely by gaming seems like a dream come true. Oh, just got to get the digs in there. This is hilarious. Already in Japan, there has been widespread discussion of hikikomori, acute social withdrawal, where technology enables young men to live as modern-day hermits. Destiny is very much a celebrated hero among those attracted to such a lifestyle. Is he? I don't know. I don't think I've ever watched any Destiny videos. Is he... Do the online hermit boys love him? Caleb is actually worse than I thought. This is the first time I've seen a YouTube personality get so fixated on a person to the point of accusing them of causing suicide. Yeah. I like I said a bit earlier, my views on Caleb were just, he seems like a bit too serious, but he seems, I was going to say unhinged. I don't think he's unhinged at all. I think he purposefully understands what he's doing. He must be disingenuous. Yeah, Destiny's not a leftist. No, 100%. Yeah, from reading this part and from... I think he's purposefully disingenuous. And yeah, particularly all this gross stuff, like throwing in the fact that Matt's mum, like, stole money and all that shit about Vosh and Vosh's dad, like, it's... And yeah, especially the, like, has thought slime caused people to commit suicide? I guess we'll never know. Like, what the fuck? No, yeah. Destiny is literally just a debate, bro. I mean, he has the omni-liberal. He's like super centrist. Destiny was known to make political comments during his video game live streaming sessions. He generally classified himself as libertarian. However, in the aftermath of Donald Trump's election in 2016, Destiny shifted toward advocating more social democratic policies. He began having debates with white nationalists, conspiracy theorists, and others deemed to be the more dangerous segment of Trump's political base. I just thought he was cringe but still amusing in a harmless way, but he's needlessly malicious. Yeah, he really... But I think it comes... you see the Vosh thing, how big a section Vosh got. ContraPoints and a H-Bomber guy, like 2 to 3 paragraphs each. Vosh, huge section. I imagine that Vosh has criticized him. Oh no, he did. He called him a Nazi, and so he has to do a huge screed against Vosh. ThoughtSime has done a video on Caleb. So, obviously, huge screed against him. It's very clear that it's personal with him. Destiny's sudden shift away from video games and cynicism with libertarian individualism mixed in toward the vague liberalism of the anti-Trump movement was widely heralded in mainstream US media. An article from Wired, published January 15, 2020, was entitled, "Can This Notorious Troll Turn People Away from Extremism?" Again, just more citations from US propaganda. There, Caleb, good job. Destiny is not technically considered to be part of the BreadTube community. While he supported Joe Biden and advocated some left-wing policies like national health care, he explicitly rejects any form of communism, anarchism, or Marxism. Destiny is also known for having occasional right-wing turns. During the upsurge of Black Lives Matter protests in 2020, Destiny spoke with approval of right-wing activists and white supremacists who shot and killed protesters. Sorry, are these the violent protesters that the BreadTubers are urging to go out? The street-fighting Antifas? Like, amid a rant condemning the property destruction of Black Lives Matter activists, he proclaimed, "Are you kidding? Now we're getting..." So, this entire book is about BreadTube. How BreadTube serves imperialism. BreadTube serves imperialism. It's right there on the page right now. All of the BreadTubers that he has just talked about, he quoted none of them. But now, Destiny gets a quote. He quotes a line from a Destiny stream. If that means like white redneck militia dudes out there mowing down protesters who they can torch buildings at 10 p.m., then at this point they have my blessing. The BreadTube community was quick to denounce him for such comments, and he suffered a significant financial loss as many former patrons were horrified. It is a bit of an embarrassment for the BreadTube community that he has functioned as their kingmaker. Ian Vosh Koczynski, for example. You've already said, you've introduced him. You don't have to say it like that anymore. You just say Vosh. We know, like, that's... You've written other books. How can you be a published author and not know this? For example, launched his career by being a frequent guest on Destiny's live streams. Most of BreadTube's big names can be traced back to some connection with Burnell. Like who? Who? Again, wow, your wild assertions would have been made better with like some evidence, with some justification. It should be noted that the author of this book's entire introduction to the BreadTube universe came from an invitation to debate Stephen Destiny Burnell. It should be noted that the author of this book's entire introduction... he is bad at writing. So it should be noted that the author of this book's entire introduction to the BreadTube universe came from an invitation to debate Stephen Destiny Burnell. Just say Destiny. You've already introduced him as Stephen Destiny Burnell. We know now that when you are referring to Destiny, that it means Stephen Burnell. Oh my God. Burnell, was entirely blown away by this writer's citing of actual data in defense of the existing socialist countries, and the debate resulted in a huge expansion of his social media following. Whose? This use of pronouns here is so confusing. A huge expansion in his social media. Burnell was entirely blown away by this writer's citing of actual data, and the debate resulted in a huge expansion of his social media. Who? Burnell approached the debate in a very smug manner. Much like this book, Caleb, one might say. Assuming that nowhere had socialist central planning, assuming that nowhere had socialist central planning ever had economic success. Among the debate at one point, Stephen sputtered out the phrase, "What does life expectancy prove?" revealing a darker Malthusian undertone in his worldview. Sargon, Dankula, Fuentes are also tied to Destiny, so what does that mean? Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you want to make a critique of YouTube as like the medium, and then the kind of things that it entails, enables and constrains based on the technology, based on like the institutional levers, based on all sorts of things, that's fine. And that would go into it. The fact that, someone as successful as Destiny, basically you make people's careers by getting on there. And then that kind of, demonstrates, you use from that analysis, you take from it whatever you will. But you can't then just say, yeah, he's the kingmaker for BreadTube. Like, what is he talking about? I mean, he's talking about shit. Absolute shit. All right. Caleb Faraday Speaks Kane. I've never heard of this guy. Caleb Kane was made temporarily famous. That's a brutal way to put it. That's so good. By a New York Times article published on June 8, 2019. The article is featured on the New York Times website. Wait, temporarily made famous. What did he say about ContraPoints? ContraPoints received advertisement from US media sources. Wouldn't this be advertisement as well? By that case, wouldn't Caleb's Debate with Destiny have been an advertisement by the US propaganda function of the YouTube state. Anyway, with an intricate graphic and text that sounds almost like a movie trailer. Okay. Caleb Kane was a college dropout looking for direction. He turned to YouTube. Soon he was pulled into a far-right universe, watching thousands of videos filled with conspiracy theories, misogyny, and racism. I was brainwashed. That does not sound like a movie trailer. That sounds like the header of a news article that wants to get you to read it. It's short, it's succinct. Okay. The article seems on its surface to be a telling story of how an impressionable young man can be seduced by extremism and become a violent radical. The article opens with an account of him buying his first firearm. However, the actual details of Kane's story are quite disappointing. What? That's a strange way to put it. One source of this book's incohesive format is that it's clearly an excuse for him to just go after people he doesn't like. For example, Destiny isn't BreadTube, yet he mentioned it. Yeah, exactly. It's ticking off the 14 characters. Faraday Speaks still identifies as a conservative, though he is known for escaping the pipeline. Right. Okay. So he went down like the alt-right pipeline, escaped it, but yeah, is just a conservative, but didn't want to like go and... Okay. Why is he talking about him? What? Okay. Caleb Kane was a young man. Why does he say the first and last name? I will edit these books for you, Caleb. Caleb, if you're watching this, I don't know if you gonna think I'm hating on you. Actually, after the last hour and a half, yeah, I definitely have. But that's your fault. But I will edit these books for you, Caleb. This book better have pictures of Maupin's wall of photos with pins and red yarn explaining all these connections. I'm sure it is somewhere. But I mean, everything's just CIA. That's it. And this person I don't like? CIA. All right. Caleb Kane was a young man in West Virginia who had grown up in a conservative Christian family, but became more liberal as he matured. According to his own account, he dropped out of college following some psychological problems and began supporting himself by working at a warehouse. While working at the warehouse, he had lots of time to listen to YouTube videos and soon became a regular listener to Stefan Molyneux. Stefan is the anarcho-capitalist internet guru who is known to flirt with misogynist and racist ideas amid his overall libertarian perspective. He does not flirt with them. He does not flirt with misogynist and racist ideas. He is a racial IQ white supremacist. Now I'm not a white supremacist, but I am an empiricist. Fucking Stefan Molyneux. Okay, after listening to Molyneux regularly, he also consumed content from other racist and far-right commentators. Kane's story might be more compelling. What are you talking about? If from there he had become a terrorist or committed hate crimes, but it stops there. The New York Times narration has one expecting that Kane became a suicide bomber or mass shooter or joined armed attempts to overthrow the government. However, he did none of this. The extent of Kane's brainwashing was listening regularly to right-wing voices online. Holy shit. Just that, okay, that's why he was downplaying Stefan Molyneux's ideology and his associations, because he's just saying right-wing voices. Wasn't Caleb the one that was talking about the importance of ideology earlier? But also he does not see the right wing as dangerous, as his enemy. His enemy is not the right. Clearly, because he's like, oh, this kid needed to be a fucking suicide bomber or a mass shooter. But oh, what? This, oh man, because okay. Kane eventually shifted his political views. A new girlfriend who had a more compassionate worldview and his changing life circumstances enabled him to de-radicalize and unbrainwash himself. Yet in Kane's interviews, he speaks as if he is repenting from the heaviest of sins. In one interview, he says with deep regret that at one point he considered going to the Charlottesville protests in 2017 but decided not to. What? Earlier on, Caleb talked about Charlottesville, and he talked about like the white supremacist killed, leftist activist Heather Heyer. Like, he said that. Sorry, this book started out fun because it was just like this wild traverse through the weird landscape of Caleb's like funny thoughts. But now it's just his gross, like disingenuous heart, it seems. Like the reason, in Kane's interviews, he speaks as if he's repenting with the heaviest of sins. That's because the reason he was going to go to Charlottesville is because he would have wanted to like put bullets in the heads of the SJW leftists who are destroying America. Probably. Knowing, going down that pipeline myself a few years ago, you do start thinking in these really black and white terms. No pun intended. And Caleb's just like, oh, we didn't kill anyone. What? After the advertising of the New York Times article. Oh, man. I can't believe Caleb got advertised all over Destiny's stream. Okay, Kane launched his own YouTube channel, Faraday Speaks, celebrating his status as a former extremist who had been de-radicalized. However, the extent of Kane's radicalism was nothing more than listening to YouTube videos, becoming more distant with his family, and at one point considering going to a demonstration, but deciding not to. You literally, if I could go back to the page and find where he talked about Charlottesville, like, he recognized the gravitas of Charlottesville. Yeah, disheartening. Yeah, it is. And disingenuous. That shit with thought slime really fucking got to me. All right. Kane has collaborated with Destiny. Oh, there you go. In efforts to combat the extremism that sucked him in. He has done interviews about how to deprogram one's friends and relatives. But what exactly are they being deprogrammed from? Listening to videos online? How can you have... Oh, wow. This is just turning into a wild rant. Oh. No, sorry. I'm just going to keep reading for a while. Having political views that change with a new romantic relationship? Considering maybe going to a demonstration? Caleb Kane has made clear in interviews that he advocates for social media to censor and remove ideas he considers to be conspiracy theories in order to prevent others from being brainwashed, as he was. Like what? I bet it's things like racialism and shit like that. Particularly if he was following Stefan Molyneux. Like that African Americans' IQs are just too low. Caleb Kane's emerge. Just say either Caleb or Kane. We know it's Caleb Kane. Caleb Kane's emergence as a minor figure in the BreadTube universe, initiated and promoted by mainstream media voices like much like Destiny and ContraPoints, is almost comical. The nature of BreadTube as a poorly executed de-radicalization effort by the most powerful factions among the Imperialists is made quite apparent. What? Oh, God. Okay. Dr. Steve Hassan. One figure who is definitely not part of the BreadTube universe, but certainly lurks in the background of discussions about deprogramming, is psychologist Dr. Steve Hassan. Over the course of many decades, Hassan has carved out for himself the position as America's leading cult expert. His books on what he calls cult mind control are widely circulated, and he appears on CIA propaganda news and other CIA outlets as an expert on the topic of brainwashing. He said CNN and MSNBC, though, sorry. As a 19-year-old, Steve Hassan was recruited into the Unification Church, the Moonies. This is an anti-communist religious cult imported to the United States by the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency to work against the growth of the communist organizations on college campuses. In the 1970s, many young people were involved in protesting the Vietnam War and in support of black liberation. College campuses were a hotbed of recruitment for the Revolutionary Union, now the Revolutionary Communist Party, Youth Against War and Fascism, youth wing of Workers' World Party, and the Youth Workers' Liberation League, now the Young Communist League, youth wing of the Communist Party USA, and other anti-imperialist and revolutionary organizations. The Unification Church, a strange religious sect that worshipped a Korean pastor named Sun Myung Moon. So here we've got a picture. The rise of religious cults, such as the Unification Church during the 1970s, was intentionally fomented by U.S. intelligence to counter the influence of Marxist-Leninist groups on college campuses. Oh, all right. See what's happened. He's become really paranoid. The driving emotion of conservatism is fear. That's why I keep mistaking right wing on my back. Yeah, I mean, yes, he's super paranoid. Everything is the US's fault. Like, obviously, the US, I'll be the first to talk about the US and criticize them. But, like, not every single bad thing in the world is because of CIA propaganda. And yeah, the fact that he is so willing to just dismiss offhand, like, the potential effects of radicalization from the right, it's weird. All right. So it began rapidly expanding in the United States during the 1970s. The group believed Moon was the new Messiah, sent to Earth to unify the Christians of the world in a global crusade against communism. Moon's cult had started in coordination with Korean intelligence as a way of deprogram... Does he just not like the word deprogramming? So now he's like, everything that's deprogramming or de-radicalizing is like against communists? A way of deprogramming Marxist political prisoners and student activists. The Moonies became infamous for their predatory nature. They financially exploited members, demanding that they hand over all their possessions and spend each waking hour as unpaid laborers raising funds for the group. Sorry, but I gotta say again, the pacing of this book is terrible. Like ContraPoints, I would say one of the biggest BreadTubers got a couple of paragraphs, like half a page. Now we're going off, and this is in the same chapter as this. The ContraPoints thing and this is the same chapter. And he's going off, like, he gives an entire background about Destiny. Nobody cares. He's giving this huge background about this cult. Like, it's interesting, but for the pacing of the book, it does not serve. This is why he should have used footnotes. He could have chucked some footnotes in there, little bits about what the cult was about, and then continued on talking about Steve Hassan. Steve Hassan admits that the cult he spent roughly 2 years as an active member of was set up by American intelligence. In his appearance on the podcast of Jordan Harbinger, he said, post-World War II, Korean War, South Korea was very unstable. North Korea is a version of what it is today, and some people in military intelligence in the United States decided, well, the North Koreans are brainwashing. We need to create a program in South Korea to stabilize the regime. They taught... Did he just make up that quote? He just made that quote up. Okay. Okay. They taught the South Korean president, you need to set up a Korean CIA. They taught the South Korean president, you need to set up a Korean CIA, we'll help you. That's such a strange phrasing. They taught the... Anyway, and they set up a re-education program for dissidents in South Korea, and they decided to use a front person, so it was not looking like a government operation, and it was the Moonies that were chosen to do that. The Moonies had, nobody knows why or how, the patents for manufacturing M16 rifles and other American military hardware. Why? Because America was leaving Vietnam. Still at the height of the Cold War, we have to stop the commies. And then somebody said, let's bring the Moonies to... Who said that? Let's bring the Moonies to the United... This is just fanfic. This is just fanfic about everyone and everything that Caleb hates. That is all that this book is. Okay, and set up counter-communist programs on college campuses, and that's where I got recruited. I was sent to fast for Nixon during Watergate because God loves Nixon. God wants Nixon. The US government has never acknowledged the existence of these things. They don't want to talk about it. As a young man rising up the ranks of the Moonies, Hassan eventually got into a car accident, and in the hospital his parents were able to lure him away from the group to their home, where he was successfully deprogrammed by other former members. Eventually Hassan got involved with the Cult Awareness Network, an organization run by Ted Patrick. Hassan worked with Patrick's... This is also boring. How BreadTube serves imperialism, and we're going off on this whole other tangent about a guy who's not even BreadTube. Hassan worked with... Okay. Speaking of the CIA's actual BS, though, Viva Chile. Now leave them alone. Yeah, I mean, that's a huge thing, that Chilean stuff. Okay. Hassan worked with Patrick's organization, which charged lots of money to families for the service of kidnapping relatives believed to be in Moonies or other groups labeled as cults. Affiliates of the Cult Awareness Network are widely accused of having held these young legal adults against their will and deprogrammed them. Individuals who were deprogrammed by Patrick and his associates testified that the deprogramming sessions involved brutal interrogations, sleep deprivation, and the very techniques the cults were accused of using. Hassan has admitted that he was involved in involuntary deprogrammings, but has not gone into detail about this. Ted Patrick was convicted of kidnapping and false imprisonment in 1980 after he and other members of the Cult Awareness Network, the organization which Stephen... We know! You've said it like 10 times! Oh my god. Okay. Kidnapped a 26-year-old waitress in Tucson, Arizona. Kidnapping and false imprisonment are both very serious crimes. Thank you, Caleb. Thank you. I didn't know that. But Patrick only received a year in prison and a $5,000 fine. Why? That would be an interesting, go into the court case. Why? Patrick also faced charges in later years after he kidnapped an Amish woman whose husband disapproved of her joining a more liberal sect. These charges were ultimately dropped. US media often highlights Steve Hassan as a cult expert, but rarely mentioned his ties to the Cult Awareness Network and accusations he engaged in involuntary deprogramming, i.e. kidnapping. Is this him? Or is this just like a recreation? What is this? Cite your sources. The Cult Awareness Network was eventually shut down in 1995 after a jury ruled that Jason... This is like 4 pages so far. ContraPoints, 3 paragraphs. Eventually, blah, blah, blah. James Cut has civil liberties and religious freedom violated when Can affiliate Rick Ross kidnapped him and attempted to do programming. Can was ordered to pay $1 million to Scott and ultimately went bankrupt. Accounts from various individuals describe Hassan as being directly involved in kidnappings, and an individual named Arthur Russell put forward a signed affidavit describing Hassan's methods. Russell said he was forcibly kidnapped by several men in prison, hands and feet bound, with his hands tied behind his back so tightly they were badly swollen and color of a bruise. Deprived of sleep for 3 days, he was not allowed to shave or wash and was denied all privacy even when using the toilet. Hassan subjected him to methods the victim later described as brainwashing and mind control techniques. God, Caleb, you're either wildly off the chain or just so boring. Russell described the experience, saying he felt like a captured animal in a zoo. In more recent books, Hassan has denounced kidnapping and forced deprogrammings, but he has not directly addressed most of the allegations about what he's alleged to have done with the Cultural Awareness Network. One would think that Hassan would be discredited due to his involvement in an organization that was widely reputed to have been involved in criminal activities. Hassan has not only avoided prosecution, but frequently appears on mainstream US television as a cult expert. Hassan composed a book entitled The Cult of Trump in 2019, declaring that the US president was much like Reverend Sun Myung Moon and had brainwashed his supporters with hypnotic mind control methods. Hassan made headlines in January of 2021 after an appearance on CNN in the aftermath of the events on Capitol Hill. Hassan said, "So in studying all the thought reform brainwashing models, I developed a BITE model of authoritarian control, and it basically talks about controlling behavior, information, thoughts, and emotions to create a new identity that's dependent and obedient. And this is a radical personality change in the mental health literature. In the APA DSM-5, it's called the Dissociative Disorder Question of Identity. And the bottom line is all of America needs deprogramming because we've all been negatively influenced by Donald Trump. Congresswoman, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez echoed his calls for deprogramming. By the way, that is pretty much everything he says about BreadTube. Soon he just starts to just summarize his international politics, education in short essay form, as he does with all his books. Are you kidding me? That's the end. Oh, what? It's like a 200-page book. What? Although, actually, that makes sense. Like, the BreadTubers that he hasn't had personal beef with, really short stuff. The couple that he's had beef with got really long write-ups. And then, like this dude, obviously this is something that he knew about. You know, the Moonies, clearly he knew about them prior to this book because they're anti-communists, and this is where he's going off on his own tangent. It has nothing to do with BreadTube. Oh my God. Okay. Hassan has been a mentor to Caleb Cain, and according to an unnamed source, appears to be advising other members of the BreadTube community in their efforts to de-radicalize Americans on the far right. Who? According to an unnamed source. Caleb, oh my God. Are you part of the CIA? Okay, Hassan describes Donald Trump as the leader of a cult and also refers to the internet conspiracy theory QAnon as a cult, despite the fact that they do not fit his own criteria for what a cult is. Hassan's BITE model of authoritarian control simply does not hold up. The behavior of QAnon adherents and Trump supporters is not restricted, and they are not told what information they can consume online or in the media. Trump's... That's an interesting proposition. There's a lot to be talked about there. I mean, but no, Caleb just waves it away. Trump supporters do not change their names or undergo hypnosis. The emotions of Trump supporters and QAnon are not subject to regulation. I feel like he's just looking at dictionary definitions of these things. It's like, oh, well, they're not told what to watch. Trump supporters are not going to watch CNN. They're barely watching Fox News anymore. Like, they're on to One America Network and all of those kinds of fucking things. They're not being... Okay. As bad as he is, Donald Trump is merely a demagogic politician with many fanatical supporters. As inaccurate and delusional as it is, QAnon is an internet conspiracy theory with all kinds of different interpretations among adherents. What? So it's a... the political movement behind Donald Trump, or the internet conspiracy theories known as QAnon, have very little in common with the Unification Church. However, while media overlooks his own shady past, Steve Hassan has been given a platform to declare Trump and QAnon to be a cult and has suggested that mass deprogramming might need to take place. So he just has a thing against Steve Hassan, right? And the Moonies. What? Oh, man. A few spare paragraphs about here and there, but he's basically just saying that these BreadTubers are CIA through false equivalency. I don't know if he's a plant or an actor or what, so confused. He's always complaining about, like BreadTubers making the left look dumb. Dude, you are doing a bang-up job of that without anybody else's help. The fact that you wrote this and then published it as a book, like what? There's no analysis that's taken place. And you can tell he just has... It's like a poorly written YouTube video. Like he's had a few little thoughts. But, I mean, in a YouTube video at least, you would then go, you would write the script, you'd record it, and then he'd be going and finding like examples of all this shit that ContraPoints and H-Bomber Guy and everything is doing in videos to play it during, after he's said all this stuff about them. Some other aspects of Steve Hassan are worth noting. Who is Steve? Oh, Caleb. While Hassan occasionally will admit that the Unification Church, which he joined and feels horrifically victimized by... Oh, what? was facilitated by the US government, he seems to hold no resentment against the CIA or the US government. In fact, in his anti-cult lectures, he often makes statements like, China is the biggest political cult in the world. Oh, here we go. Okay, he's critical of China. Yeah, he's the enemy. He seems to have a particular vendetta against the Russian government, claiming that Russian President Vladimir Putin leads a political cult. Oh. Wow. So I knew he was pro-China. Is he pro-Putin as well? And is it just because Putin is like not America? They're on the other side of America, so they're an anti-imperialist fucking country, and you have to stand up for them. Hassan attributes much of his success to Robert J. Lefty, a US... Why are we still talking about this guy? Oh my God. His City Builders book is literally just pieces he had previously published in some very real, not funded by weirdos or covert online magazines, cobbled together in sporadic order. He's paid by Sputnik and RT, which are funded by Putin. Oh yeah, of course. Okay, yeah. He's on RT all the time, isn't he? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. So then he talks about... I better read it. Hassan attributes much of his success to Robert J. Lefty, a U.S. Air Force psychiatrist who conducted research in Japan and Korea on U.S. soldiers who had been converted to communism in POW camps. Hassan admits that much of his understanding of brainwashing and cult mind control comes directly from Lefty, an individual who's very widely known to be involved with U.S. military intelligence and its psychological operations against communism. It always comes back to that. Hassan's avoidance of prosecution for kidnapping, his celebration of mainstream media, you mean his advertisement in mainstream media, his working of U.S. foreign policy talking points into his cult lectures, his hinting at inside knowledge about the Unification Church's intelligence connections, and his close association with a high-ranking U.S. military psychiatrist all indicate that Hassan is much more than a typical psychologist or anti-cult lecturer. Does it? Hassan appears to have friends on the inside who enable him to do what he does and see him as useful in carrying out their political goals. Does he still have like a kind of Cold War mentality about everything? That's actually what it's kind of feeling like. Like everything is, done in the shadows, and it's all, the different governments, regimes fighting against each other, and there's only two sides. It's just diametrically opposed. It's good to hear someone confirm this guy's insane. I felt like I was going bonkers doing research on these freaks. He's bizarre, right? Yeah, wow. I had no idea from the few things that I'd seen online. Wow. I'm glad that I trolled him a bit on Twitter now. Anyone who criticizes Caleb or anything he likes is imperialism or tool of imperialism. Yeah. Well, yeah, because he's like, no, I'm anti-imperialist. So if anyone's against me, they must be imperialist. Wait. Hassan appears to have friends on the inside who enable him to do what he does and see him as useful in carrying out their political goals. The same can be said for BreadTube, which appears to be some kind of cyber age deprogramming operation aimed at the US right wing, but also targeting legitimate Marxist-Leninists and anti-imperialists. What? And that's it. That's the end of... Oh, man. Counter gangs in the late Cold War. Understanding BreadTube's emergence as a brand of establishment-approved socialism while observing the lingering influence of a deprogrammer named Steve Hassan. What? How is that How has he suddenly just linked those two together? Man, his brain is a conspiracy theory. Damn it, I'm an imperialist. Yeah, we're all imperialists. I'm sorry to have to tell you, but the good thing about that is that your CIA money will be in the mail. So just hang out for that. Forces us to discuss the 20th century Cold War and how the Soviet Union and its allies were defeated. Oh, there you go. Like a minute ago, I'm talking about the Cold War, and he's like, well, I guess this forces us to talk about this thing that I love. Below is an overview of the facts about... Oh, God. No citations, I'm guessing, for these facts. Okay, below is an overview of the facts about how American intelligence was able to maneuver events toward the ultimate collapse of the Soviet Union. This will lay out the historical precedent for an entity like BreadTube and the purpose it serves both domestically and internationally. I bet it won't. The Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union began in 1946 after the Second World War and ended in 1991 when the Soviet Union was dissolved. The Cold War can be divided into two distinct periods. The first period of the Cold War, beginning in the mid-40s and ending in the late 60s, involved American intelligence agencies and geopolitical strategists operating under the assumption that the enemy was communism. That is such a wild, I don't want to say misrepresentation there, but oversimplification. Like, whether or not it was truly an ideological battle is very, very contested. Like, didn't he just say up here geopolitical? Yeah, like there's also like geopolitics that come into it. Oh, he's not going to know any of it. He's not. Oh, okay. The Truman Doctrine of Containment involved the United States building the NATO alliance and seeking to unify the world against China, the Soviet Union, and other countries in which Marxist-Leninist parties had taken power. This period involved two massive US military interventions, one on the Korean Peninsula and the other in Vietnam. Here's the international politics education throw up. Oh, good. Okay. Both of these operations came at heavy cost to the United States in terms of human life, domestic morale, and international credibility. Such a simplistic view of Cold War historiography. Absolutely. It is. And I'm sure it's going to get dumber. Like, the more he talks, it can only get dumber. From everything I've seen so far, it's only going to make me angrier and angrier. During the Korean War, the world was shaken by the use of massive bombing of civilian targets by the US military. European allies and other international observers looked on in horror as US Army General Douglas MacArthur threatened to drop atomic bombs on China without even the permission of the elected US president. Domestic opposition to the Korean War was limited due to McCarthyism and post-World War II patriotism at home. However, among the soldiers on the battlefield, it was a different story. So let's look at this picture. At first, only communists like the WBD Dwyer clubs and Youth Against War and Fascism protested the Vietnam War. However, by 1968, mass anti-war sentiments and a domestic political crisis had unfolded. Why is this on this page, where they're only talking about the Korean War, and they're still talking about it? On to the next page. Poor layout. Poor editing, poor layout. Okay, many American soldiers were disgusted by their orders to bomb civilians. Roughly 4,000 captured US soldiers signed confessions to war crimes and declared themselves to be communist sympathizers in POW camps. This launched a wave of fascination with brainwashing in American media and among American intelligence researchers. At the war's conclusion, Korea remained divided, and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, which the USA had sought to eliminate, remained intact with a highly loyal population. Oh yeah, he's a tank. He supports North Korea, doesn't he? It's what they teach you in international politics second-year university, but really, really basic, reductive, etc. Yeah. I find it wild that someone goes out of their way just to write a book on BreadTube. Like, how many people will read it seriously? Yeah, actually, that's an interesting point. Like, what was his motivation for doing that? Huh. That's a good question to explore, actually. The setbacks experienced by the United States during the Korean War came back with an even greater vengeance during the Vietnam War. Talk about... Earlier he was saying how something was written like it was a movie trailer. You're writing like a movie trailer, Caleb. Protests against the war took place all across the world, where the Vietnamese people celebrated as peasant anti-imperialist heroes resisting the foreign occupiers. I mean, look, I'm only thinking from an Australian point of view, but that was not the prevailing narrative within the anti-war movement. Like, they weren't celebrating peasant anti-imperialist heroes. Okay. At home, protests against the war combined with the rising unrest of the African American community resulted in a widespread episode of domestic unrest. In 1968, Almost every major US city went up in flames following the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and campus anti-war protests became very popular. The communist factions of Students for a Democratic Society and the Black Panther Party emerged as explicitly Marxist-Leninist organizations seeking to overthrow US capitalism in alliance with Vietnam, China, Cuba, and the Soviet Union. Among the US Army, defections, insubordination, and fragging of officers became widespread. Yes, so glad to... I'm also glad that you stumbled upon this stream. However, just wait. Just wait. It will become painful. His motivation is showing he's smarter and correct because he wrote a book to respond to internet videos. Actually, potentially, with seeing the kind of vitriol that he was spewing out against the people that he had beef with, he's just been like laying awake at night, just stewing, thinking of comebacks, like you do about, people that bullied you in high school, and you're like, oh, if only I'd said this. Oh my God, I just realized he's like the Onision of the left online. Actually, I don't know who. No, it would probably be worse to be Onision. No, probably worse, yeah. The United States was ultimately defeated in Vietnam, and as a result, a new strategy for dealing with the Soviet Union and international communism emerged. This brought on the second stage of the Cold War, referred to as the Late Cold War. Zbigniew Brzezinski, a Polish-American academic, joined with the strategist Henry Kissinger to establish the Trilateral Commission. So, Brzezinski was a huge hawk a huge right-wing hawk. So the Trilateral Commission was a think tank funded by the Rockefeller family to reorient U.S. foreign and domestic policy in light of the defeat of U.S. forces in Vietnam and the widespread state of upheaval in the country at the time. In his 2-hour streams, which he does several times a week, often on weekends, to his cult following, he calls his detractors evil over and over. Very cultish. Wow. What? I gotta say, I've been missing out on this entire world of Caleb Maupin. This is wild. Oh. Wow. Evil. That's something else. He focused on soft power and manipulating communists against each other. He was also Polish, and he was, I think, 14 when Stalin and Hitler divided Poland. In the what was it? The Molotov-Ribbentrop? No, the Ribbentrop. The pact. Anyway, the non-aggression pact. He like Warsaw was no more. He had a reason to be against the Soviet Union, as it were, which was expansionist. Like it took over Poland. I guess that having a book makes things seem a bit more legit. Yeah, probably. Oh, Caleb. Brzezinski's strategy for working against the communists involved scaling back the use of massive bombing and long-term military engagements, but instead utilizing proxy forces and exploiting the divisions that already existed among communists. Frank Kitson, the British intelligence officer who oversaw operations to defeat the Kenyan Land and Freedom Army, boasted of his use of counter-gangs to defeat the Kenyan resistance to the British Empire. During the 1950s, Kitson directed the British Army to form groups of black Africans and deploy them throughout Kenya. These counter-gangs pretended to be Mau Mau liberation fighters, but were actually allies of the British. These forces collected intelligence, committed atrocities that could be blamed on the Mau Mau, sowed division among the Kenyan population, and ultimately enabled the British to defeat the insurgency. I've been looking through Caleb's YouTube videos. A video called Xi Jinping and Chinese Communist Party are the cutting edge of Marxism. I can't even with this man. Why is he taken seriously? Yeah, what? That's such a weird... Like, who is he appealing to with that? The cutting edge of Marxism. That, like, because obviously they learned Marxist-Leninism in, dialectical materialism in Chinese schools. And then, teenagers, as teenagers do, 17, 18, 19-year-olds, get a little bit radicalized by it. And they're like, hey, why is our society not looking this way? Like, look at all these things and the contradictions. And then they get disappeared. It's mental. China's classless, moneyless, and stateless. Yeah, that's what Caleb loves. I've just realized that he is going to say that BreadTubers are a CIA psyop counter gang that do stupid things on the internet and make real leftists look bad, right? That's his entire thing. That's going to be his entire fucking argument. I think he's popular with people who can have a psychological, ideological identification with him. And I don't know if he consciously knows this or he's doing it unconsciously. That's interesting, actually. Because when I was getting the thumbnail for this stream, I typed in Caleb Maupin into Google Images, and there are a lot of pictures of him when he was younger, real long hair and out there, fighting the good fight on the streets. And I wonder if he's feeling slightly dejected. Now I'm just going to, just psychoanalyze a guy I've never met. But I do wonder if he's gotten to this point and, he's committed his entire life to this ideology. And suddenly, the revolution hasn't come, obviously. All the things he's been fighting for, it looks like things are going the opposite direction. And then he looks and there's all these young people that... Burger King. And there's, all these young people, these young entertainers online who are espousing, relatively leftist ideology, depending on who you're talking about. And I imagine that's going to make you feel pretty shit. And so then he's like, oh, actually, I'm the real ideologue here. Anyway, that was my little psychoanalysis of, this man whose book I've read for about 2 hours and never met. Frank Kitson later went on to oversee British military operations against the Irish Republican Army. In his work, he engineered a policy of arming Protestant extremists and enabling them to kill IRA members. Wait, haven't we already read this? Didn't he already talk about this dude? A 2015 lawsuit was brought by Mary Heenan. What is that sentence? By Mary Heenan, whose husband was assassinated by Ulster Defence Association members in 1973. Did anybody edit this book, actually? Her lawsuit alleged that Kitson was responsible for the use of loyalist paramilitary gangs to contain the Republican nationalist threat through terror, manipulation of the rule of law, infiltration and subversion, all core to the Kitson military doctrine endorsed by the British Army and the British government at the time. Brzezinski directed the United States to take a page from Kitson and begin setting up counter-gangs around the world to fight Soviet-aligned communists, while the United States seemed apparently uninvolved. The first obvious use of the Kitson counter-gang strategy in the aftermath of the US defeat in Vietnam came in 1978 as the Kampuchea War. Cambodia? What? The Communist Party of Cambodia was overrun by a fanatical leader named Pol Pot and his followers. Pol Pot rejected industrialization and argued Cambodia could achieve... There you go, this is a picture of what he's talking about. Achieve full communism on the basis of the agrarian economy. Pol Pot attacked Vietnam, resulting in the Kampuchea War. China, arguing that the Vietnamese were acting as agents of Soviet social imperialism, sent its forces to invade Vietnam in support of Cambodia. It has later been revealed that Pol Pot, the crazed ultra-leftist who rejected basic principles of Marxism-Leninism and slaughtered hundreds of thousands of Cambodian and Vietnamese communists, was in fact a covert puppet of the United States. Wait, what? Is that true? Sorry, what? Pol Pot had been educated in France, and the US government was providing him with guns and weapons in his fight against the pro-Soviet communists in his homeland and against Vietnam. Sorry, but wasn't Kim Jong-un educated in Sweden? What? For a second I misheard you and thought you were saying that Maupin was 14 in Poland during the NRP, and I was just imagining him as an old guy angrily scribbling out complaints of BreadTube. Literally, old man yells at cloud. Yeah. He doesn't get, YouTube jokes. I mean, he kind of is. He doesn't get, comedy, and then he gets super offended. Who knows if anything is true? Citation needed, Caleb. Exactly, yeah. What? Pol Pot and his allies represented a counter gang, much like those engineered by Frank Kitson in Kenya. Okay. So this is the first that I've heard that Pol Pot was a secret CIA plant. But he thought, okay, maybe, I don't know what was in Pol Pot's heart, but I'm fairly certain Pol Pot thought he was putting into effect Marxism as he understood it. Like, he did think that he was going to have a revolution by doing all the things that Maupin was fucking talking about right at the start. Okay. The use of counter gangs became a key staple of US strategic policy in the late Cold War. This is what he wanted to write the book about. He could have just written a book about the Cold War. He didn't need to have a fucking go at Vaush and bring up, apart from a debate with vegan gains, like in a book about the Cold War. Brzezinski bragged that he'd set up the Afghan trap for the Soviet Union, creating a situation in Afghanistan where the Soviet Union would feel obligated to send in the military, and then arranging for Osama bin Laden to build a global army of Wahhabi extremists from across the planet to fight them in the name of Islam. Okay, now I'm going to edit Maupin yelling at some clouds. Excellent. That is excellent. I would love to see that. Oh, okay, where are we up to? Blah, blah. In Angola, the United States armed a group called UNITA, led by Jonas Savimbi, a literal cannibal and mass murderer who claimed to be a Maoist communist. Savimbi's forces fought against the pro-Soviet ruling party of Angola, murdering civilians as well as Cuban and Angolan soldiers in a lengthy civil war. In Ethiopia, the United States armed Eritrean separatists to fight against the pro-Soviet Derg government. In the Middle East, two anti-imperialist governments, the Islamic Republic of Iran and the Ba'ath Socialist Arab Republic of Iraq, were played against each other. The US government first supported Saddam Hussein in his invasion of Iran, and later, the US government supported Iran in its fight against Iraq. There were mass deaths on both sides among both fighters and civilians. He already wrote all these parts before as part of his journalism, just pieced it together, I think. Oh, yeah. I absolutely would believe that. Because there's no thread. There's no link through the whole thing to anything to do with BreadTube anymore. During this time, many pro-Marxist college professors and writers in Europe received covert support from the US Central Intelligence Agency. They were actually, that would also explain why, because he's already talked about the CIA earlier, and he'd already used their acronym. So you don't need to keep introducing it as US Central Intelligence Agency when you've already done that and established what CIA means. But that lends credence to the fact that these are all just cobbled together works that he already had, and he just didn't bother doing any editing at all. So they were carefully being nudged to push a more anti-Soviet brand of Marxism, focused on cultural issues, rather than class struggle. Are you shitting me? Is he going to talk about cultural Marxism? What? Oh, okay, I'm excited again now. Also, though, a lot of people on the left, after it was, what was it? Fucking, was it 53 or 57 when the Soviet Union went into Hungary and did that? The left was like, oh, okay, now we get it. It's a big reason why he keeps using first and last names too. Not within the same pages and stuff. That's just bad writing. But throughout the book, yes. You want to see him talk about cultural Marxism? Well, yeah, if he's going to be talking about they're focusing Hungarian Revolution 1957. Thank you. Yeah, after that, and the Soviets went in, people on the left were started questioning the Soviet Union and started distancing themselves from it. Although apparently for Caleb, it's all just the CIA. I can appreciate some of his writing about these histories. His take on BreadTube is seemingly based on some personal issues. Yeah, absolutely. And like I was saying, this is the stuff that he's actually interested in. And you can tell. And so what he's done is just tried to cram and shoehorn his bad takes about Vosh and Thought Slime into some larger thing about the Soviet Revolution. Oh God, search Caleb Maupin so-called cultural Marxism facts and myths. Oh no. God. Okay, I'll do that after I finish this chapter. All right, what are we looking at? Blah. The CIA boasts about the Congress for Cultural Freedom program, in which magazines like Partisan Review, Encounter, and Demonat were covertly funded to reorient Marxist thought among European intellectuals. In 1978, the Italian, French, and Spanish Communist parties cut ties with the Soviet Union, and Brzezinski labeled them Euro-communists. Interesting. But, okay, no, Caleb doesn't care. Caleb wouldn't give a shit. Counterculture-oriented religious groups like Reverend Moon's Unification Church. What? Counterculture-oriented. Wow, wait. Okay. Transcendental meditation, Tibetan Buddhism, and the Hare Krishna movement were deemed to be very useful by American intelligence in rolling back the influence of communists among intellectuals and dissidents at home. All of this covert manipulation of armed communist groups, socialist countries, and leftist intellectuals culminated in overthrowing the Soviet Union in 1991. Many of the confused students who marched to overthrow the Marxist-Leninist governments in Eastern Europe did not think that they were helping to bring in neoliberalism and the economic demolition of their homelands. They believed it was just to make a more democratic form of socialism, or socialism with a human face. Anyone know of any particularly crazy Maupin videos? I didn't realize how many videos he's made. Oh no. All right. Decades later, in conditions where information travels much faster in the age of the internet, BreadTube appears to be yet another counter-gang. Does it? These people that I don't like appear to be just another bunch of these other people I don't like. Convenient. Like the Khmer Rouge unit to Congress for Cultural Freedom of the various counterculture religious cults. It speaks in the name of left-wing sounding ideals. In reality, it is most likely serving one section of the American ruling elite and the intelligence agencies. Covert support is most likely being provided in order to enable the algorithmic hacking that has allowed BreadTube to flourish as the primary left-wing voice online while waging a relentless campaign against others. What? That is wild. He's literally saying covert support is most likely being provided in order to enable the algorithmic hacking. What? What? Wow. You are wild, Caleb. While waging a relentless campaign against others. Okay, two things I'm going to bring up. So yes, obviously the CIA was funding different groups and etc. around the world to engage in proxy wars. So was the Soviet Union. Like, they were doing it at the same time. That, like, does he not know that? Or he either doesn't know it, doesn't want to talk about it because it makes his side look bad, or he agrees with it when the Soviets are doing it. Jesus. And the other, what was I going to say? Oh, compare the amount of money and funding that the left has on YouTube to the right on YouTube, to like Daily Wire and shit, or Steven Crowder, like, or Blaze, or Rebel, or are they the same thing? Anyway, there is so much money in right-wing YouTube and right-wing online presences. And then Caleb's like, oh, actually, the CIA is probably like teaming up with YouTube to make the algorithm play Thought Slime. What? The important thing to remember about counter-gangs in the late Cold War is that they are generally not conscious deceivers. Some will read the above contents and believe that African Maoists, unique to left-wing intellectuals, or the BreadTubers of 2021 are all secret CIA agents, or some other crude interpretation. Nothing could be further from the truth. Dude, I agree with Caleb about one thing. He definitely agrees with it when the Soviets do it. Yeah, I would wager that he does. There is no doubt that the fighters of UNITA, the Wahhabis who fought alongside Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan, the intellectuals who pushed Eurocommunism, or even the breadtubers of our time legitimately believed in what they said and did. While they may be naive about the support they receive, what makes them useful proxies is their sincerity. Selecting certain ignorant and confused young people to be the voice of the movement, and perhaps carefully nudging them to frame their rhetoric in a certain way, is key. You know, if you posit enough conspiracy hypotheses, eventually one or even a few will eventually come true. Yeah. Oh, all right. By rewarding them with patrons and clicks, the narrative can be carefully reinforced. Does he think that the CIA is subscribing to these BreadTubers' Patreons? Because where's mine, CIA? Oh, and clicks. God, a new socialism that is not anti-imperialist, not even genuinely anti-capitalist, but is very useful in containing and beating back the right wing, can be cultivated to serve imperialism. So he views the right wing as just part of, like the right wing. Communism is when the government plays thoughts like. So conclusion. An overview of the personalities, histories, and connections of various breadtubers and affiliated personalities highlights certain similarities. I don't think it does, because I don't think you really overviewed the connections, etc., except for like 3 people that were on Destiny. Including you. You were one of the 3 people on Destiny. What are you talking about, Caleb? What the fuck? Oh, none of them have any direct ties to any existing communist, anarchist, or socialist activist groups, aside from perhaps Democratic Socialists of America. Okay, 1. So? Also, isn't Thought Slime a big Workers of the World? What is it? Union? That big union. The cat one. Thought Slime's all into him. Okay. Blah, 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 blah. So no record of actual activism as Marxists can be found when looking over their public history. So he's just angry they're not all Marxists like him? Much like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, they seem to have appeared out of nowhere to suddenly become representatives of left-wing politics. She's a sock dem. Like these people... appeared out of nowhere. Which means what? Funded by CIA. Okay. International Workers of the World. That's it. Thank you. Yeah. Thought Slime's always talking about them. It's like join an organization. I wonder what Caleb thinks about labor unions. He probably would say that they're anti-imperialist. I'm sure they serve imperialism somehow. So while they do not have ties to Marxist, Leninist, or anarchist activist groups, wasn't he talking about how they're all like encouraging people to go out and become Antifa street fighters? Is Antifa not an anarchist activist group to this dude? So they do have apparent ties to the US power structure. Their work is celebrated in mainstream US media outlets. They are presented as a safe kind of leftism and a needed counterbalance to the rise of Donald Trump. By who? Some of them have odd skeletons in their closets. Natalie Wynn's sudden rise to prominence. Wait. What? Natalie Wynn's sudden rise to prominence. Some of them have odd skeletons. What? So I was a ContraPoints fan before she transitioned, like publicly, and there were some great videos and all of that older stuff, and like ContraPoints put in a heap of effort over years. I wonder if because obviously all of those older videos now have been deleted, so I wonder if Caleb, looking back through her back catalogue of videos, is like, oh, all of a sudden her first video's got 1 million views. How did this even happen? It's just a basic lack of understanding of what he's written a book about. Jesus. Vaush's shady history in relation to topics like child pornography and lack of charisma. Oh man, stick the knife in, Caleb. Oh Jesus, lack of charisma. Oh, the criminal conviction of Matt Thoughtslime's mother and his fixation on topics like suicide and self-harm. Fuck you, Caleb. Holy shit. You're so gross. Destiny's shift from libertarian to social democrat, followed by his celebration of right-wing attacks on protesters. Mysterious social media history of socialism done left. Caleb Kane's celebrated status as an ex-right-wing extremist despite any real history of right-wing activism. Oh, man. I was waiting for you to read that one. It did not disappoint. Lack of charisma. Oh, man. All of these indicate that BreadTube has powerful allies who are using them to serve a purpose other than communist revolution. Oh, man. Oh, I thought that was going to be the end. He's continuing. All right. Divisions within the capitalist... Okay, sorry. This is like 200 pages. 206 pages. This is chapter 1. And we're at page 50. Before, when I was talking about pacing. What? That's not how you write a book. Okay. Divisions within the capitalist ruling class are the natural outgrowth of an economic and social crisis such as the Western world is currently experiencing. The alt-right and white supremacist groups put forward a toxic ideology that leads to hate crimes. Wait, you literally just up here. Caleb Kane's celebrated status as an ex-right-wing extremist despite any real history of right-wing activism. And then we go down here. The alt-right and white supremacist groups put forward a toxic ideology that leads to hate crimes, mass shootings, and a justification for political repression. What is it, Caleb? Is it a toxic ideology that leads to like terrible outcomes, or oh no, it's just not any even, you just watched some YouTube videos, didn't even need to be de-radicalized. Make up your mind. The existence of BreadTube is as an entity pushed forward by elements within the deep state to defend the liberal order from right-wing opposition is not really in itself a scandalous revelation. Trust me, Caleb, it is a scandalous revelation that the CIA is like giving these people patrons and clicks and making the algorithm watch, like, oh, do you want to watch philosophy? Actually, why didn't you look at Philosophy Tube? Philosophy Tube is obviously left wing and is obviously one of the OG BreadTubers. Like all the security in the state and all the kind of blah blah blah. What? Here's the thing. I want to live in a classless, moneyless, and stateless society, but who really thinks human society is mature enough to handle such a thing at this point in time? Best to ease into it. I mean, the thing that I always think is there are, like, not in America at the moment, but in Australia, we've had 8 or 9 years of centre-right government at the federal level. And the majority of people are voting for... Like, the majority of people are holding these values. Like, you have to convince people that the values that they are currently holding and currently expressing, oh no. Yeah, it's a big, yeah. I don't know what Caleb thinks is going to happen. Oh, crap. No. Oh, my God. All right. Okay. No, what? All right. So, It is to be expected in times such as these. However, in addition to demonizing the Trump movement and the various online currents aligned with it, BreadTube has another target. One thing that all these figures agree on is that China and Russia, and to some extent Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, Vietnam, and Nicaragua, are somehow toxic, totalitarian societies, and it is the duty of Western leftists to undermine and destabilize these countries. What? Like, I see how he didn't put Non-Compete on here, who I would say is one of the more prolific anarchist YouTubers. And obviously, they're married. He's married to Luna? Anyway, Luna is a literal Vietnamese Marxist-Leninist who lives in Vietnam and who makes videos for BreadTube about Marxist-Leninism. And Non-Compete and Thought Slime are great friends. And so clearly Thought Slime would have a lot of time for Luna and her ideas. The fact that, I mean, he just knows nothing about it. And it's exactly the same thing as like, oh, you think differently to me, therefore you must be are somehow toxic totalitarian societies, and it is the duty of Western leftists to undermine and destabilize these countries. What? Walsh has been the most explicit in equating pro-Chinese communists with Nazis while celebrating the Hong Kong protesters who unfurl Pepe the Frog signs and Trump banners, but these sentiments are more or less prevalent throughout the entire BreadTube sphere. More or less. I would say less. The narrative that somehow Trump supporters and QAnon are an extension of the illiberalism of the anti-imperialist bloc is also implied in much of BreadTube's material. It would be great if you linked any of it. The main problem with BreadTube is not that it dissects the ideas of the far right. This is largely a noble task, though it is sometimes very poorly executed due to the ideological limitations of those who avoid offending the liberal order. What? The main problem with BreadTube is that it is blatantly miseducating people and misrepresenting key concepts of Marxism, socialism, and communism. BreadTube does not seek to make those exploring these concepts in a time of economic crisis into revolutionaries and anti-imperialists. Rather, they seek to make them into something much like they are, foot soldiers of the liberal order. Oh, man. They embolden the most powerful capitalists in their efforts to maintain power, beat back anti-imperialist states, and suppress unrest and rebellion at home. Deconstructing the various misrepresentations and delusions presented by BreadTube in order to achieve this goal will be the purpose of the remaining pages of this book. Oh, Caleb. My brain is going to fall out of my head when I vomit it up. Oh, my dad's a Vietnam vet, and in the 90s went back there and ended up staying with someone whose brother died as one of the attackers during the Tet Offensive, and my dad was on the US side. He said that the lives of the Vietnamese were doing really well as they worked towards communism peacefully. Yeah, and I think the whole thing is that we recognize, and I think that's where, tankies and shit go so off the rails, is that people, like, we can connect with people. That saying, like, we have more in common with, normal people in other countries than we do with our own, billionaire class or our own politicians. And that's true. It's, all the division, et cetera, and then people like Caleb just come along, and everyone that doesn't agree with him is just CIA funded. I love the idea that BreadTubers are being funded by the CIA, and the way that they are doing that is by becoming patrons, clicking on their videos, and affecting the algorithm. I mean, it's pointless to try and make any kind of fucking good, actual argument. So true, though. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think, what is it? It's 8:30. Okay. been reading Caleb Maupin for 2.5 hours. I'm going to go and have a beer and let my body decompress for a while after having to put it through that. I'm an imperialist now, thanks to Caleb. Oh, thank you for everyone that was in the chat. This has been great, and I'm so glad that I chose to do it like this than just reading through it and recording it into my microphone, which would have been incredibly boring. And I'm glad that I was able to work through a lot of the stuff. 2:30 a.m. here in California. Jesus, this was fun. Yeah, no, this was awesome. So, don't know what it's Christmas Saturday, Christmas Eve. Have to get back and read the rest. Hopefully, I could do it and maybe knock it out in another 2. Leave this up and I'll cite you in my work for fun. Nice. Fellow Californian. Oh, yeah, I'm gonna edit the little bit at the start and maybe put some music at the back and then upload it as an actual video. Coming for you. Awesome. All right, everyone have a good night or day wherever you are. And just make sure you watch out for your CIA checks in the mail. Thank you, fellow imperialists.